Hey friends, I'm so excited to be with you guys on our podcast today. We're just coming off a massive Mother's Day celebration, which has been incredible. Obviously, we believe in marriage and family and motherhood and all the above because those are biblical things. But what we're finding in America at the same time is we are having an underpopulation problem. In fact, in America today, we're not even replacing our citizens, and that's not happening just here. That's happening all over the globe. The bigger question is why, what's at stake, what are the consequences of that? And I guess an even more important question is what can we do to create healthy family formation? And as you're going to find out in the podcast today, it all goes back to worldview. I think you're going to enjoy the podcast.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
We are so glad you guys are watching with us today. It's always a treat to have you, and we're going to talk about some very, very important things today as it relates to mothers and babies. You know, we just got done celebrating Mother's Day at Living Stones, which is always something that's a big deal around here. Now, I do have to mention, Matthew and I were just talking about that beautiful bike that was a prop that was just down there. We had flowers in it and all that, and a Mother's Day sign. I was going to ride into my show, but Matt already told me that he probably already had that idea because he announced to me that the tires are flat. Not that we did anything. Probably the wonderful owners who blessed us with the use of that bike, you know, might have taken the air of the tires so that we were not involved.
So people were doing that.
Yeah, so that people like me would not get this idea to
decrease
ride
their
that
liability
into the show.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, we had talked about this. You know, Mother's Day as it relates to church attendance is right up there in the top 3. For us, it's the top 2. In fact, we had one of our largest crowds this year outside of Easter. So lots of folks come, lots of moms, I think, have sway over their children, and others, husbands perhaps say, honey, come worship with me on Mother's Day.
Yeah.
So that's all I want, come worship with me.
Come to church, and then we go brunch afterwards.
But we always love to go big because we love moms and we know how important they are, and we love families, we love marriages, and we're going to talk about family formation today. But before we do that, I thought I'd give you a little trivia, have a little fun today.
Sweet.
Got any guess how much the average person spends on mom? Like, what do you do for your, your mom's
Mother's Day?
Long distance, but how did you celebrate, or even for Debbie?
I call my mom up, and that's pretty much with her, with my wife.
Okay, wait a minute. I have a fact on that. More calls are made on Mother's Day than any other day of the year. Reportedly, there are approximately 122 million calls, including yours.
Yeah.
Made on Mother's Day. So that's pretty well. So that's good.
It's just so funny because in my mind, Father's Day is probably not even close to that. Because most dads are like, why are you calling me? Oh, today's Father's Day. Whereas moms are like, where's my son? Why didn't he call me yet?
Well, the other amazing thing is flowers and cards go crazy on Mother's Day, but they're not as high on Father's Day. We're gonna have to do something to rescue Father's Day. What do you think?
They get other things. Dads are just wired a little differently.
All right,
we appreciate different things. Yeah.
You're exactly right. But back to our budget here. Yeah. Ready for this? About $260 a person spent for their mama. That's pretty expensive. $260.
I got to up my budget for my wife and my mom. I'm going to tell you how much I spent.
So you didn't hit the $260 mark?
Nope, not even close.
Also, I have a little Mother's Day hack. You know, I do not try to fight the Mother's Day crowd because going out to eat at restaurants. Another fact I will share with you today: the busiest day of the year for restaurants. According to the National Restaurant Association, as much as 48% of people make plans to go out to eat on Mother's Day. That's crazy. So we don't go out to eat on Mother's Day, probably because I'm a pastor as well, and we're kind of busy here on Sunday on Mother's Day. But we kind of celebrated throughout the week. I took my mom out for dinner, actually a couple of times, breakfast, dinner. We went and bought some flowers and did that kind of stuff. But anyway, another little tricky item here for you. What president was responsible for making Mother's Day a national holiday?
Roosevelt. Eisenhower. I don't know.
Wait, that was pretty close. Did you get that? No, pretty close. Close to Roosevelt. How about this? I would have guessed this. A progressive. Woodrow Wilson.
Wilson? Okay.
Woodrow Wilson, 1914.
I can see that.
You can see it.
I can see.
I
can see Wilson doing that.
That one hit me.
Okay, progressive back then is different from progressive now.
All right, that's true.
1914. Those guys would be like diehard conservatives today. So
they would be diehard. Hey, Mom. Hey, my mom walked in right now. You got to come over and just say hi to everybody. We're talking about Mother's Day. She's strolling through the foyer here. This is providential. You can't ignore Providence. Matt, are you catching her back there? We were just talking about you.
Listen to a podcast.
I'm watching Flashpoint.
Oh, I was watching Flashpoint.
Did you have a good Mother's Day?
I did. It was awesome.
Tell everybody how awesome it was that your son took care of you, right?
Gave me hot dogs. My favorite.
Nice.
Well, we had fun, and I hope you loved on your mama. All right, that's all we need. That was great. You did a good job.
Love you.
Love you.
Love you.
Love you.
Wow, that was cool.
Perfect time.
All right. Now, we're talking about the importance of elections on this podcast, and it wasn't but a little over a year ago. This is the governor of Wisconsin, Tony Evers, and his budget proposal. He created quite a stir because he wanted to get rid of those pesky terms called mother, father, husband, and wife. Instead of husband and spouse is inserted. In fact, he said they cross out the word mother and inserted the word inseminated person. This article was called Inseminated Person versus Mother. Dems keep proving they have lost common sense. That's where we were at a year ago. We couldn't even use the term mother. We couldn't even define what a woman was, let alone a mother as an inseminated person. But anyway, the issue becomes we have a problem. I want to talk about this a little bit before we move on. For years and years, the left was pushing this false narrative that the world was full of overpopulation, too many people, not enough resources. That was the cause of a whole bunch of issues, right? And of course, it was all attached as well to the global warming, climate hysteria cult. Now we're finding just the opposite. In fact, for the first time in America, I think we said it takes 2.1 children per family to simply just keep your population.
Replacement rate.
Yeah, replacement rate.
Yeah.
The challenge now, according to a recent study that came out, is currently we have 1.66 births per woman in America right now, so we're not even replacing our population, and we are not alone. There are other nations that are dealing with the same challenge. Mm-hmm. But I guess I want to talk today about the question of what in the world do we do about this problem, because even President Trump recognizes that it is a challenge, and government needs to step in and try to do something. Although we have to answer that question too: is government really the source here?
Well, he was talking about incentivizing, like paying several $1,000s per every new baby and stuff like that.
Right, you know. And other countries, including China, as you were pointing out before we got on air here. South Korea birth rate is like under 1, like 0.8. And so
it's crazy.
So the challenge again is
Japan.
not overpopulation. The challenge is really underpopulation. But connect the dots. How is it that having less people, less babies, less mamas is actually a really bad thing for life?
Well, it's interesting because I've always been interested in the population issue, even back when I was teaching a class on environmental science for Indiana Wesleyan University.
I remember that.
Yeah,
we both did a little
stint doing that, right?
Teaching over at Indiana Wesleyan.
And the textbook they had was just, to me, hideous. It was it wasn't worldview based. It wasn't Christian worldview based. It was just talking about human overpopulation from a very secular perspective. So I kind of whipped that out and threw my own curriculum.
Yeah.
And I remember showing a video talking about the dangers of underpopulation and how if you're at not 2.1 replacement rate, you basically are losing your own nation. You're losing your own country. And this is 10, 15 years ago, America was already declining. Europe was largely declining. And the one people group or culture that was massively expanding is the Islamic nations, having replacement rates of 4, 5, 6. That's one way that they were talking about taking over Europe without firing a shot.
Well, you've seen those videos where you'll have a Muslim young man taunting a European and basically saying, we have this many babies. You're not even hardly having any children. In a short while, we'll be in charge of your country, and they're doing it. It's happening all over Europe.
So back then, it was kind of like a worldview, kind of a holy war, kind of cultural challenge. Fast forward 10, 15 years today, now it's not just worldview. It's absolutely worldview. It's not absolutely cultural, but now it's economics. Now is reality of how it's challenging nation states. Now the people who are having lots of babies are people like economists, people like Donald Trump saying, hey, America's civilization needs to survive. People like Elon Musk who's saying, here's a guy who make electric cars. He's the one, who's saying our biggest population issue is not overpopulation, but way underpopulations, and we got to do something drastic. I was listening to a financial person talking about the reason why every nation's underwater with debt is because of the underpopulation that we can't sustain it, so we have to keep printing money, which leads to inflation.
Connect the dots for people maybe listening. Like you would think, okay, we have less people, so we should have more money. How does that actually lead to?
It's about productivity. It's about if you just look at. I remember when I was doing the whole thing about looking at the population so China was like the first experiment, right? Because they had massive population and they were trying to curb their population.
And they actually, because again, of Communist Party, very top down, controlling, they passed what's now been called the infamous one-child policy. And so they forced. Then we talk about this in the worldview class, which, by the way, hope you can enjoy that. We have one more as you guys are listening to this, one more on Wednesday nights. But we talked about the unintended consequences. There was of course, they aborted mostly girls because the families wanted boys over girls. That created a gender disparity problem where young men could not find wives. That led to a kidnapping problem from bordering nations where they were actually kidnapping young women. And they could not support the elderly population.
Well, that's the major issue. As this huge giant population gets to older age, who's going to create the economy? Who's going to create the finances, the productivity to be able to sustain that larger group? So instead of having that, you just print money. Now, there's talk about artificial intelligence, all that stuff to maybe close that gap a little bit. But again, I think what I've read is math science says it's not possible. We are in a very bad path, United States and other, especially European nations. A lot of these are supposedly Christian nations who are not having babies.
So you brought up a really good point. That the people who are sounding the alarms right now are not the normal people you would expect to be sounding the alarm, which would be people like us, pastors. It's economists and
scientists and big worldview people who sees the global perspective and says, hey, we're going off of the cliff. We got to stop.
Well, and again, we're trying to solve a problem and we're actually trying to promote life, right? And not just, sometimes we get about solving problems, but that's like the negative side of it, right? We want to promote life. We want to promote godly marriages. We want to promote family formation. We want to promote an atmosphere where children can be born and welcomed, where kids should be celebrated. Hey, mom's pregnant. Yay. Not that this is viewed as a burden or a curse or a problem. This is should be viewed as a moment of great celebration. So how does that happen? Well, you encourage people to form good families and then good marriages and then have families and then support a culture around them where they can experience love and support in their marriage. And I like to use the phrase, live happily ever after. A lot of times we're talking to folks at the altar and encouraging them, hey, turn your house into a home. And what I mean by that is don't just live together. Form a covenant and let the grace of God that you need to have a great marriage be supplied as you do it in God's way and as you bring your family into alignment with God's purposes. And so, we've talked about this a lot here, even from the pulpit, and we've seen a lot of people who are moving in a healthy fear of the Lord that say, hey, I need to make this right, and they are making it right. But overall, we have to ask the question, what can we do what do we need to start doing, I guess, as a culture, and what do we need to stop doing as a culture if our goal is to create healthy marriages, first of all, and then blessed families?
Well, one thing I want to share is for longest time, people think that the premise is the reason why people have don't have a lot. Well, the finance, money is the reason why people do or don't have lots of kids. And I believe through all the evidence we've seen in the last couple of decades, that's simply not true anymore. It's not about money. It's not about how much you have. In fact, you tend to think, if you make a lot of money, then you tend to have a lot of kids. That's actually the opposite.
But that is the number one reason, even though I think we both would agree it's a lie. It's the number one reason often given to justify abortion is we can't afford this baby.
Sure.
And yet we're living in America, which again is one of the most affluent nations on planet Earth. So generally speaking, this myth that we can't afford a baby is just that. It's a lie. Especially it's a lie in the midst of all the prosperity and support that we have around us. But nevertheless, we come up with all these kinds of myths. But it's a deeper issue than that. And I wanted to highlight, because we're talking about worldview issues, David Hogg, who is now the face of the Democratic Party. He is 25 years old. He's supposed to be the young, upcoming, the Greta Thunberg of the Democrats, right? And so Bill Maher was interviewing him about what needs to happen for the Democratic Party to get young people, in particular young men, back into the Democratic Party. And this was the brilliant analysis that David had to revitalize that wing of the Democratic Party. It's really quite insulting, actually. What we have to do, he says here, is figure out how to bring people back in and work towards the bigger goal of advancing the future of this country and helping young people, especially get by so that they're able to focus on their lives and, getting with a young woman or something like that instead of how they're going to pay their rent, for example, or how they're working two jobs. And here's the quote that made the headlines. Young people should be able to focus on what young people should be focused on, which is how to get laid and how to go and have fun. So he's viewing like working a job and paying your rent. These are like burdensome little things that get in the way of what we should be allowing young men and women to do, which is basically just run around and have sex and have fun. That's the face of the Democratic Party. And then we wonder why we have no family formation, why we're not, we're in a demographic dark age here where we're underpopulating. That's what the Democrats are leaning on, I guess. That's what they have to offer. Great article here from the Family Research Council talking about 3 ways to increase the birth rate while respecting human dignity. And I want to start with a really big one because I, again, deal with this at the altar a lot with praying with people and talking with people. One of the recommendations is we need to ban porn. And I've wondered this, when you get conservative administrations, porn has not gone down in terms of its market, at least monetization has gone way up. And it seems like our Justice Department doesn't really do anything. I mean, we're even talking about, friendly social sites. I say friendly only because they're not known as porn sites, but Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or X, you can find pornographic images if you're looking for them on those sites pretty easily. And a lot of young men today are just scrolling or whatever, run into images that would be considered pornographic, Same thing with a lot of our entertainment that's coming out. Our cable shows and things of that are full of nudity and I don't know if you'd call it pornography, but certainly lewd images. And why is that important? Well, numerous studies show the negative impacts of porn use. It's associated with infidelity. So talk about family formation. That's one of the big reasons for family breakup, marital breakup, is infidelity. Reduced gray matter in the brain. That's interesting. Less relationship satisfaction. Less sex with a spouse, and so men that are married that are watching porn actually have less intimacy with their wife than men who are not watching porn. desensitization of sexual violence, the weakening of the cingulate cortex, a region of the brain responsible for moral and ethical decision-making, which, again, does not bode well for blessed society, and erectile dysfunction. So men that cannot even get aroused anymore because they're so desensitized. But the biggest issue, and I love the way this person quotes C.S. Lewis here, the worst impact of pornography is what it does to a person's ability to love. As Christian author C.S. Lewis put it, love is not affectionate feeling, but a steady wish for the loved person's ultimate good as far as it can be obtained. And he goes on to say, contrary to this, pornography teaches the viewer to disregard others completely in exchange for isolating pleasure, making the user far more selfish. If consumed regularly, pornography destroys a person's ability to love. So, you think about it. One of the God-given urges, desires that He's placed in a young man is the sexual desire, which historically has been satisfied when he forms a family, when he makes a covenant with a woman, when he becomes married, and that was the God-ordained blessed outlet for sexual expression. Nowadays, this article went on to say kids as young as 12 years old, most kids by 12 have seen pornographic images either on their phone or some form of social media or whatever on TV. And so we have a highly sexualized culture, and at the same time where sex becomes everywhere in common, you have the inability to actually have a wholesome sexual relationship with another human being. You have the inability to produce children. You have all kinds of side effects that come with porn. And so we find men that are not interested in real women because they are infatuated with viral, fake women. And they never learn how to have social relationships or actually love somebody because it's all narcissistic and selfish. This is a big, big problem.
Yeah, I mean, you and I both know it. And talking to any married person, you realize being married is so much more than sex. Being married is the greatest adventure and the greatest challenge a man has to go through.
Yeah.
And a lot of these information or images or narrative is basically like, this is just about you. Well, marriage is the opposite of that.
Exactly.
So it's like you don't even know you're sabotaging yourself when you're exposed to that at a young age, what marriage is really, truly about. So hence, when there's less marriages and less stable marriages, you're going to have less reproduction and less family.
Yeah. And it used to be, you'd have to go stand at some porn place, go up to the counter and ask to purchase, magazine or video or whatever that you knew was treating women in a terrible way. And there was a sense of public shame and all this stigma associated with it. And not anymore. I mean, you can just turn your phone on and close the door and you're in the privacy of wherever you are and you can, watch pornography. So massive, massive problem. But I guess my question is, that's one way where the government can do things. If pornography is illegal, then why aren't we shutting down some of these porn sites or whatever? I don't know. I guess that's always a fight that most politicians don't want to take on. Certainly in the church, we need to be aware of this and do what we can to create, again, a healthy sense of sexuality and a beautiful vision for marriage and why those two don't go together. That was one of the things, anyway, that this article brought up. The other thing I want to highlight is the mifepristone. I think I said that right. The abortion pill, which right now is very easy to get to. Before Biden left office, basically they, at the FDA, I think it was, relax all of the requirements. This pill used to have to be administered after a doctor's visit and under the oversight of a doctor, and patients were made aware of all the side effects, and the doctor was very much involved, even though we would say it's still evil and still wrong. At least there were some safeguards for the woman herself. Now we're finding that at least 1 out of 10 women who take this pill, of course, their baby is killed, but they experience serious side effects, life-threatening side effects. And so one of the arguments is, we need the Trump administration to take a strong stand on this particular, policy and at least put some teeth back into it to make it not as much available. You know, the lie on the left is it is, quote, safe as Tylenol. But it actually says here, after ingesting this drug, a woman is left alone in her bathroom where she delivers her often visibly recognizable unborn child into a toilet while trying to determine if the extreme pain, nausea, vomiting, and bleeding she has experienced is normal or a life-threatening complication from the drug. And as I just mentioned, 1 in 10 women have a serious side effect to this. So this is very, very serious. And, you know, when I look at President Trump, you know, we were, during his last term, we were incredibly surprised at how pro-life he was. When he ran this time around, it seemed like he was waffling a little bit on his stance. But sometimes that is, you know, political chess playing, because Mr. Trump is very astute at making deals and at getting things done. So sometimes I think he's setting something up for his next move. But for instance, President Trump enforced the Hyde Amendment. He ended federal funding of abortion overseas, the Mexico City policy. He protected taxpayers from funding abortion. President Trump has promised and delivered, expanding the Mexico City problem, issuing a rule preventing Title X taxpayer funding from subsidizing the abortion industry, cutting all funding to the United Nations Population Fund. And I mean, I could read on and on and on and on and on. I think without a doubt, we could argue that he has been the most pro-life president perhaps ever in the history of our country in terms of his policy.
Yeah, actual actions.
Yeah, actions. And yet, one thing that just came out that was especially disturbing was, and I saw Josh Hawley's comments on this. Let me get to my proper paper here. This article, again, from FRC, Hawley stunned by DOJ's sudden shift on key abortion pill case. So what I guess has happened here, Trump, when he was campaigning, said that abortion should go back to the states. It should be a state decision. Now, we could argue from a biblical worldview perspective that if abortion is on the same level as far as a moral problem or a wicked act, the same level as, say, slavery, that should not go back to the states any more than we allowed the states to determine whether you could enslave another person, and we shouldn't allow the states to determine whether you can murder a baby. That should be off the table completely. That was an argument of many pro-life people. But nevertheless, if President Trump is pushing for this to be a state decision, then he cannot continue to allow the federal government to pump the abortion pill into states where abortion is illegal. That's a massive conflict. And of course, under the Biden administration, Biden didn't care who was against abortion or why they were against abortion. He certainly didn't want the voters to be able to determine that. He just, with their ideology, they just said every woman should have the right to an abortion and nobody's going to stop us, basically. And so that's why they passed all of this abortion pill stuff and they lowered all the requirements for accountability to make it readily available with zero oversight at all. And so I guess the challenge that, I think Tony Perkins and others on the conservative side of it is saying, Mr. President, you cannot have it both ways. You cannot say the states and the people and the state legislatures should make policy and then allow the federal government to circumvent all that policy and send these abortion drugs right to people's, doorsteps. So this was an interesting development here that just happened. In late 2023, we had the 3 states, Missouri, Kansas, and Idaho, that challenged these relaxed policies around the abortion pill. Under Barack Obama, the FDA dramatically changed how the pill was regulated, allowing it to be used through 10 weeks of pregnancy, prescribed to minors, and dispensed by healthcare providers via telehealth. So you didn't even have to be in person with a doctor. You could do it online. And evidently, the Justice Department, Trump's Justice Department, has basically said to these 3 states to go ahead and back off on that lawsuit, which is sending a lot of question marks into a lot of conservatives as to why the president would be taking that action. Josh Hawley, the Republican senator from Missouri, said this: "It's really a question of, are voters going to be able to set the policy and protect life in their states or not?" And the position of the Biden administration was, it doesn't matter how voters vote anywhere. It doesn't matter what state legislatures do. The Biden DOJ and the Biden FDA said we're going to allow providers to mail in chemical abortion drugs into every state, no matter what. If your state restricts it, it doesn't matter. We're still going to mail the abortion drugs, and now women can take them under the Biden rules without any physician supervision, any physician help or assistance. He says it's incredibly dangerous, and it also cuts the legs out of the Dobbs ruling, which said that states have the right now to determine abortion policy. So it's going to be interesting just to see, where this one goes. In terms of what the president's actions are going to be. But let's get back to the worldview issue. Maybe we could end with this, because I think this is interesting. We talked about how this is not ultimately a policy issue. It's really a shift in worldview. I like what John Stonestreet with the Colson Center said. He said, nations can't buy their way out of this cultural shift by incentivizing people to have babies with money. In other words, today's population decline isn't at root a policy or economic problem, it's a worldview problem. Behind the developed world's fertility struggles is a cultural shift in views, not only about children and parenting, but more fundamentally about marriage and sex. As one Chinese official observed about the 2022 decline, citizens have lost a willingness to have babies and are delaying marriage and pregnancy. For starters, he says marriage is no longer viewed as a foundation upon which people can build their lives and livelihoods. Increasingly, it is viewed as a kind of capstone that adorns young adulthood. You and I talked about this, coming after one has gone to college, achieved economic independence, and made a successful start to one's career. Now, you talked about that growing up in Chinese culture, although I don't know that it's just Chinese culture, but just how this drive for career success, for achievement, for status.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's a Chinese culture. I think it's just is American. It's an American dream.
Well, and I think it's a developed country's luxury that we're going to keep pushing that off. And again, the reason we're pushing off marriage is because we're still having sex. So we'll still have sex or watch porn or sleep around or get laid, to use Mr. Hogg's language. Because we can get to that later, but I got to chase the ladder, climb the ladder. I got to be successful. And instead of, we used to tell people, hey, right out of high school or right out of college, get married. If you found the woman of your dreams, marry her. Why are you waiting? Build your life together. Now it's like, wait. We got to have all of our ducks in a row, our financial ducks in a row, our career ducks in a row. And then we decide we're going to get married. Like I said, it's a shift in viewing, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think I think that's probably a smaller factor. I think the biggest factor is like when you're in your 20s, I mean, you want to have sex, you feel the urges. And now you don't have to get married to do that. In the past, there's a natural inclination for you to put the ring on someone's finger, marry them.
Right.
Then you can, fulfill that desire, that part of your desire. And that's a natural, process you go through. Now it's way delayed. Partially it's probably career and money. You want to have everything together, whatever. And I don't want to speak to that because everyone's a little different. But for me, I think it's just so much quote unquote easier to have those fulfillment through hooking up with other people or pornography. And then when things are right, or people living together, and then things are right, then they get married. I think that's a huge obstacle, huge shift in culture.
Absolutely, because I think when I got started with my bride, it was the joy of we're going to build something together, not I'm going to go build my career or whatever apart from you. We're going to pursue our dreams together. That's kind of shifted the together part to where I don't know why marriage comes into the situation at all. I guess is from a man's perspective, there is the philosophy out there that men don't need women,
women don't need men,
and women don't need men. I mean, which again I think is obviously massively detrimental to our goal of forming marriages and families.
I think the other major issue, because just because people get married doesn't mean they want to have kids.
Exactly.
I mean, so again, building, I think the desire to build is still real. You have very successful entrepreneurs who build technology and build organization and business, whatnot. But somehow we shifted from the perspective that building a family and treating your kids like your number one ministry, and treating your kids like your disciples, like treating your kids like your legacy, somehow that has left our worldview.
Right, and the enjoyment that comes from family. You know, like last night, I'm sitting around on my patio with my mom, with Marion's mom, with my children. Some of them have had children. My children who have gotten married and now their spouses. And I'm watching this beautiful scene unfolding in my backyard as we're just enjoying this incredibly gorgeous May afternoon and eating together and laughing and reminiscing and making new memories. And I'm like, you know, how do you put a price tag on that? So it's not all about just chasing a career or chasing success in the marketplace somehow, although we're not diminishing that, but certainly there's more to life than that. And whatever happened to the joy that comes out of just being, like you said, with your kids, with your wife?
I think part of it is degradation of family leads to more degradation of family, right? So if you grew up in a family that's broken, you grew up in a family that never had that, you don't have a vision for that, so you just go with what you do know. You know, you work hard, you make money, and that's what you do. When you grow up in a happy, fulfilled family, then I'm sure there's a much greater likelihood that you want the same thing. You know, but if you grow up in you have never seen happy family before, or even happy marriage before, that's what you're going to live out. You know, that's part of nature too.
You replicate what you know.
Only what you it's only
and
what
if you
know.
came from a lot of brokenness and dysfunction, that's all that you know. Which is why I love what we're doing here and what God has birthed in this place. Because I like to tell young people, look, why are you shacking up? Number one, it's not like marriage. It's nothing like marriage. It's very different from marriage because there's no covenant there. And number two, you know, what are you afraid of? What are you waiting for? Maybe you did not have a good experience in your family of origin, but you're surrounded with incredible truth and incredible marriages in this place that can help you. In fact, they're available every week for you to learn from: premarital counseling, ongoing marital input, training, instruction, godly people with godly marriages. So you can say, hey, we're having a little rough time right now. Can you help me, get out of this? And you can get all the tools that you need in a healthy local church to have a great marriage and great family.
I think the problem is, if you look at America or the rest of the world, there are just not many places like that. I mean, again, we're not just talking about the Crown Point community. We're talking about the United States.
Yeah.
The truth is, very few places do people see healthy marriages, or very few places when churches talk about healthy marriage and emphasize marriage or demonstrate healthy marriages.
To see it. Yeah.
To come alongside and say, hey, we're going to help you in this very crucial process, the skill set that no one's ever trained you for. In fact, you have never experienced what healthy marriages look like.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality we face out in America today, and let alone other places in the world, Europe.
I think certainly we're finding that the alternative is a sterile, death-producing vision. It's ugly. It's selfish. It's turning sex into a commodity. I read one quote from some gal that was on one of the basically Pornhubs, saying she didn't realize she had an ATM machine between her legs. To view your sexuality as an ATM machine, basically that she services guys and she has a paycheck coming from the act. I mean, it is crude, it's disgusting, it's ugly, and eventually people go, you know what, I don't want to live this way. And I think we're seeing kind of that revolt, because there's a great awakening happening among younger people that I think are just fed up with that kind of lonely, self-absorbed lifestyle. And I'll end with this quote: if the nations of the world are to avoid the inevitable challenges of population decline, people will need to have children. The only way that will happen is if they are convinced of the truth and goodness and beauty inherent in marriage and children. I like that. Truth and goodness and beauty. That's what inspires people to want to be married. That's what inspires people to want to have children. And I think that's our job as believers in Jesus Christ, is to model that. You know, I'll close with this. I remember when I was a youth pastor at another church, I had a teenager in the youth group come up to me and said, as serious as can be, how come when we look around churches, we can never find anybody like over 30 that's married that seems to be happy? And I thought, wow, what a terrible indictment of the marriage culture, and this was not out in the world. This was their experience in the local church. So we certainly have to do a better job of loving our spouses and enjoying this process of marriage and family and modeling before a watching world the beauty of God's design, not only for us and for the satisfaction we get, but for the health of our nation and the nations of the world. So I hope this podcast has been helpful to you. And if you're struggling in any way in your marriage or in your families, please know that there are incredible resources around, especially if you're close enough to be part of our Living Stones family. We'd love to turn you on to those resources and practically help you. So reach out to us if that's you. But let's build healthy marriages and families, and let's display the greatness and the wisdom of our God. We'll look forward to seeing you guys next Thursday. Have a great week.